With that, we're going to jump into operators and expressions. And before we get into actually using operators and expressions, there's a little bit of sort of background information that I need to show you. And those are called type conversion functions. You will need to use these because variables, as we know, have different data types in them. The data type of a variable limits what you can do with that variable. For example, if I have two strings, I can't do math with those strings, even if those strings contain digits, right? So I have to convert them. So there's a type conversion function for every data type. And they're fairly easy to remember because they're named the same as the data type that they convert into. So for example, float will convert whatever value I put inside as the argument here. It will take that value and convert it to a float or a floating point. str or string will take whatever I put inside the parentheses and turn it into a string. Now these are all return type functions, so they return a value. So whatever I put inside them isn't actually changed. It is used as the argument, and then it returns something. I'll show you in a minute. I'll make more sense. Int will convert whatever is put in there to an integer. Remember, an integer is a number without a decimal. So let's take a look, because I know that was kind of abstract right now. If I have, let's say, a generic variable, and in this case, it's a string. We know it's a string because it's in quotes. And I have, let's say, an integer. I cannot do this. We'll just call that str for short. There we go. Okay, so I cannot do this. Why? Well, can any of you tell me what Bill plus 45 is? No, that's a impossible thing to do. So when I run this code, oops, there we go. When I run this code, it says can only concatenate string to a string, not integer. What it's trying to do is concatenate strings. I can do this. You've seen me do this before. And what that does is it concatenates the strings. Concatenate is just a long word that says smushes them together. Okay, it takes the two strings and puts them together. str plus str2 puts them together. Now, if I have another integer, I can, of course, say int plus int2. I can add those, and in that case, it's doing math. So it returns an integer, 79. I just can't do this. Now, if I want to do this, there is something I can do, and that is I can take this and I can change it to a string first by putting it inside the string function. Oops, why isn't it callable? Let's do it outside here. Okay, so if I do int equals str int, why is it not callable? I'm just going to try something else here. That's very odd. There's something very strange going on because this should not be giving me an error. Let's try it. Let's try it somewhere else. There is more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. I'm just going to try this out and see what we got going on here. Text plus. Okay, so I've got, you can't really see it very well here because my text is so small, but for some reason my PyCharm is having a little freak out at the moment. So I put text equals str, and inside that I put an integer. Now, in order to add those together, I have to change the integer to a string, and then when I run that, it's going to say 23 hello. Okay, I'm going to try and go back here, find out what's going on with this, because this is very strange behavior. Let's just restart PyCharm. That'll show it. One of the things that you will learn about technology, if you stick with technology or use technology in any capacity for any length of time, is that you've got some really weird stuff that happens sometimes and you can't explain it. And that's okay. I'm still unsure about why this is doing this. The funny thing about this is that I ran this exact same code yesterday on the same computer, and it did not yell at me. But so type conversion, you're just going to have to take my word for it at this point. Type conversion is important because you have to be able to transform variables into certain things in order to use them. And so one thing that we'll need to do is, if you remember this, or let's see, age, input, how old are you? So if I do this, if I run that, it's going to expect what kind of input from the user? A number, right? But is that number numeric? Or is it an integer? What's the data type that it's going to give me? Always a string. If I'm responding to input, whatever I type in there, no matter what it is always a string. So if I want to change it to an age, I would call this on that. Oh, now it's not going to give me an error. That's cool. It's totally messing with me, guys. So we've got int age equals int str age. Now I can do math with it. So if I wanted to do, say, int age in 30 years, let's just say int future age equals int age plus 30, print, we're going to do an f string, in 30 years you will be int future age. Okay, so I can do that. Now, this is an integer, but it doesn't matter because when I'm using formatted string, I can inject any kind of data type here. Does not matter. It only matters if I'm trying to do something with it, right? So if I run this code, how old are you? Okay, so that's how that works. Now, a few of you, I'm just going to take this opportunity to remind you, a few of you have been getting stuck because you have input statements in your program, or maybe you have 4 input statements, right? It's going to take them one at a time. It won't go past this ever. I could literally be 78, still sitting here, and this computer would still be waiting for me to answer this question before it goes on to the next thing. So if you have multiple input statements, right? If I've got multiple input statements, then it's still going to just ask me them one at a time. So it's asking me, how old are you? Put that in. What's your name? Okay. So it does them one at a time, and it'll wait for you to respond. It won't do anything until you do. Okay, so that is why it's important. This is one of the main reasons why it's important to do type conversion, because if you're asking a user for input, it's always going to be a string. If you're wanting to do math with that, and you will want to do math with it in assignment 3, you've got to change it to a float or an integer or something. Get rid of that. We don't need it anymore because now my computer's working properly.